Have you ever wondered what happens if we apply Jehovah's Witnesses' own rules to their 1919 doctrine? We should no longer speculate and create antitypes, modern fulfillments, for types, earlier patterns, unless the Bible itself, specifically Christ or the inspired writers, makes that connection. David Splane's 2014 annual meeting speech is located at the 2 hours 8 minutes to 2 hours 25 minutes timestamp of the full 4 hours video. We're going to use that method taught by David Splane himself about types and antitypes and see what it does to the idea that Jesus appointed the faithful and discreet slave in 1919. Here's the twist. We're going to use only two sources, the New World Translation, NWT, and the method that the governing body has publicly promoted. No apostate books, no outside commentary, just JW rules tested against JW doctrine. Stay with me to the end, and then you tell me honestly, can 1919 survive David Splane's own standard? Quick overview. What is Spawn's rule? David Splane's rule. No antitype, unless Bible says so. First, what did David Splane emphasize about types and antitypes? In one of his talks, he basically said, stop creating types and antitypes everywhere, unless the scriptures themselves clearly say there is a type and an antitype. In simple words, don't say, this Old Testament event represents something in our modern time, unless the Bible itself clearly makes that connection. So the new governing body method is, no dual fulfillment, no antitype, unless the Bible explicitly says so. That's the rule we're going to apply today. And we're going to test one big teaching with it. The idea that in 1919, Jesus appointed the faithful and discreet slave. After inspecting all of Christendom, what texts are used to support 1919? The 1919 teaching usually leans on three main passages. Malachi 3 verses 1 to 5, the messenger and the Lord coming to the temple, refining his people. Matthew 24 verses 45 to 47, the faithful and discreet slave being appointed. Revelation 11 verses 1 to 12, the two witnesses, their death and resurrection. The idea is Malachi chapter 3 equals Jesus coming to the spiritual temple to inspect and refine. Revelation 11 equals the Bible students as the two witnesses killed in 1918 and restored in 1919. Matthew 24 equals the faithful slave gets appointed over all Jesus's belongings after this inspection. And out of this prophetic chain, you end up with Jesus inspected all churches from 1914 to 1919, and in 1919, he chose the Bible students, JW leadership, as the faithful slave. The question is, does this match David Splane's no antitype, unless explicit rule? Let's start with Malachi. Malachi 3 verses 1 to 5 under Splane's method. Malachi 3 to 1, NILT. Look, I am sending my messenger, and he will clear up a way before me. And suddenly the true Lord, whom you are seeking, will come to his temple. The NWT and the rest of the Bible already tell us who this is. Matthew 11:10. NWT quotes Jesus. This is the one about whom it is written, look, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way ahead of you. Jesus applies this to John the Baptist. So, the messenger in Malachi 3 to 1 equals John the Baptist. The true Lord coming to his temple equals Jesus' ministry in the first century. The Bible itself gives us that fulfillment. Now, here's the key. To support 1919, the organization says there was a first fulfillment in the first century, but there's also a bigger, second fulfillment from 1914 to 1919, where Jesus comes to the spiritual temple, inspects, and refines the Bible students. But under David Splane's rule, we must ask, where does the Bible ever say that Malachi 3 verses 1 to 5 has a second fulfillment in 1914-1919? The answer is, it doesn't. The NWT identifies the first fulfillment clearly. The second fulfillment in 1914-1919 is an added antitype. It is not explicitly named in Scripture. So, if we obey Splane's standard, we must accept the clear, first century fulfillment. We must not invent a modern antitype unless the Bible clearly says so. Under that rule, the 1914-1919 application of Malachi 3 is speculative. That already weakens the 1919 doctrine badly. Revelation 11 and the two witnesses. Now let's move to Revelation 11, verses 1 to 12. The organization says, the two witnesses picture the Bible students and their leaders around 1914, 19. Their death, in the account, represents the suppression of their preaching in 1918. Their resurrection pictures the restoration of their activity in 1919. Here's the problem. No verse in the New World Translation ever says that the two witnesses are the Bible students. The identity is made by matching details in the vision to selected historical events in JW history. That is exactly the kind of type, antitype creation, that Splane's method warns about. Let's run the Splane method test. Does the Bible itself say, these two witnesses represent a group in 1918, 1919, called Bible students? No. Does any New Testament writer say, in the last days this prophecy will fulfill in the early 1900s in America? No. So, according to the new rule, we should focus on the primary meaning of Revelation 11, not build an extra prophetic layer for 19, 18, 19, 19. That means the JW explanation of Revelation 11 as a picture of the witnesses in 19, 18, 19, 19 is, again, an unofficial antitype created by the organization, not by Scripture. If we stick to Splane's rule, the two witnesses cannot be dogmatically tied to 19, 18, 19, 19, and the Bible students. And if that falls, a major support for 1919 disappears. What's left of 1919? Let's put the pieces together. To defend 1919, you typically need Malachi 3 equals Jesus inspecting and refining a modern spiritual temple between 1914 and 1919. Revelation 11 equals Bible students as the two witnesses killed in 1918 and revived in 1919. Matthew 24 verses 45 to 47 equals the faithful and discreet slave appointed over all Jesus's belongings in that same time frame. But under David Splane's own approach, Malachi 3, the Bible explicitly applies the messenger to John the Baptist and the Lord's coming to the first century. A second fulfillment in 1914, 1919 is not named in Scripture. So by Splane's rule, that second fulfillment is an assumed antitype. Revelation 11, the Bible never says the two witnesses are the Bible students in 19, 18, 19, 19. So that identification is another assumed antitype. Matthew 24 verses 45 to 47. The text speaks of a faithful slave and a master's arrival, but it does not say in the year 1919, nor does it name a specific organization in Brooklyn. If we take the new JW rule seriously, no second fulfillments unless Scripture clearly states them, then the 1919 appointment doctrine loses its prophetic chain. You no longer have a solid scriptural bridge from Malachi 3 and Revelation 11 to a specific year, 1919, and a specific group, the governing body. Instead, 1919 becomes a prophetic pattern constructed by the organization, not a clear teaching of the New World Translation. And that is exactly what Splane's rule was supposed to stop. Honest conclusion and personal appeal. So what do we have? If we apply Brother Splane's methodology consistently, the 1919 doctrine is not based on explicit Scripture. It is based on modern prophetic pattern making, the very thing we were told to avoid unless the Bible clearly identifies the type and antitype. Malachi 3:1 is explicitly tied to John the Baptist in the first century. Revelation 11 never names the Bible students. Matthew 24 never names the governing body, or the year 1919. So here is the uncomfortable but honest point. David Splane's own teaching about types and antitypes, if applied fairly, destroys the prophetic foundation of the 1919 appointment. That doesn't mean you stop loving God. It doesn't mean you stop loving Scripture. It means you're seeing 1919 for what it is, a human teaching without clear NWT backing, yet you're told that obeying the governing body is essential proof of loyalty to Christ. Final question to the viewer. If you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or you love someone trapped in this system, stop and face this head-on. The Bible never clearly says that Jesus inspected all churches from 1914, 1919, or that he appointed one faithful and discreet slave in 1919. That whole story hangs on organizational interpretation, not on clear NWT Scripture. So here's the uncomfortable question. If your own governing body tells you not to invent types and antitypes unless the Bible clearly names them, why do you still accept 1919, a doctrine built on exactly that? Does 1919 survive David Splane's own rules, or does it collapse the moment you apply the standard they gave you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't dodge this. If this shook you or made you think, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who is tired of being told what to think.